So, thank you for the introduction. Yes, we do production of everything built in the world for the next decade. Who builds it, where, when, and how many. This is updated, honestly, in the recent days, hour by hour. So if something comes through your phones about a new tariff or something else, let me know and I'll try to bake it into the story live here. Cool. So to sort of set the stage, I want to do a little history, current, and future story of the automotive space. And 2016 was the best year in North America, 17.8 million units that were built. And I sort of look at this idea of pre-COVID and post-COVID. There's currently about 60 regions in the world that are building light vehicles today. 6 major regions: North and South America, Eastern, Western Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific. And we always break out, obviously, China because it's its own sort of juggernaut in the story. But the real takeaway here on this slide is that most countries and regions have sort of plateaued off since they're pre-COVID, other than China. China survived COVID on the production side. They're actually on a growth path. Now, if you look at North America in more detail, and we break it up by the 3 obviously major markets, where we're at this year is about 15.75 million. We do have a growth path, but we will not be getting back to that north of 17 million in our foreseeable future through the end of the decade. Okay, this idea of build where you sell over the last 15 years, we don't build Buicks here anymore. We build them in China where they're all consumed, things of that nature. Better utilization of plant capacity. Obviously, the powertrain mix, which we're going to talk about a lot today, are really influencing the build. And most of my customers are the suppliers. And it's very easy to talk about how we want to move things in the automotive industry. But the automotive industry is glacial in speed. Suppliers are bidding on programs today that won't be built from 3 years from today. And obviously that falls at least into 1, maybe 2 political life cycles as well. So we're not inventing the new green iPhone after last year's blue iPhone. A lot of moving parts, so to speak. And when there's all this disruption on certain industry, it's very difficult for people to plan. And right now, in the last decade, everyone said, well, Tesla exists, where's the next Tesla? And then when the next person comes in, a Rivian or a NIO or a BYD, and says, hey, we're the next one, they expect the suppliers all to run in and put a ton of capacity up there. And we found out that there's Tesla and there's sort of everyone else in this space. So if we look into major markets, obviously Canada, we're somewhat flat. We'll get you to about 1.6 by the end of the decade. Again, high water mark at 2.35 million. Back in 16, and obviously a lot of things have changed in that time frame. Ingersoll, Oshawa, things going on Oakville, and so on. Now, what happened was, that people aren't paying attention to, is 14 vehicle manufacturers got the job done for the most vehicles built in 16. 10 more on top today, 24, doing 2 million units less. And that's a problem because suppliers are volume-driven animals. They say, I'll give you a better price if you give me more volume. And the vehicle manufacturers say, I'm going to keep on working on the same playbook for the last 20 years. They go, yeah, but you're giving me less volume. I can't give you a better price. And they say, well, competition in China, everyone's beating me up and things like that. You got to help me, supplier. But this is the big push and pull that's going on in the industry today. It's very, very difficult to navigate. And we're going to add 4 more by the end of the decade, still not cresting that 17 million time frame. So this is where the raw disruption hits. More players, less volume makes it very difficult for the supply chain to really remain competitive on a pricing side. Now, there's an eye chart here. I think we're going to find a way to share some information for you, or talk to me. I'll give you a copy of this. This is sort of Canada on one slide. The big takeaway here is we look at this from a powertrain. So BEV is obviously a battery electric vehicle. A plug-in hybrid is a PHEV. A CHEV is a standard hybrid, meaning no plug, more regenerative braking only. And then ICE is a pure ICE vehicle in our story. We'll get you to about 27% of all vehicles built in Canada by the end of the decade. That'll be pure BEV. Obviously, none of this aligns with governmental and environmental agendas. You got to keep reminding yourself, consumers drive this market, not policy. Yes, policies are very important to put in place, but if people are not consuming the product, it's very difficult for these manufacturers who have one customer, which is a shareholder, to make their nut at the end of the day. So this is, again, lots and lots of stress on this economy and what's going on. But if we just, the quick takeaways here, right? Honda, we're going to get back to capacity. Honda's really bucking the trend and really pushing down an EV path right this second. A little different from their other Asian-based competitors. Ford, Oakville, even with the retooling right now, they were supposed to have a 3-road Explorer and an Aviator that was going to be electrified. No one's buying 3-road electrified vehicles out there, so they said, we're going to dial it back. We're going to be F-Series. I said, okay, that's good, F-Series. But with our current political climate and Trump and things like that, if he sees a true American brand going into Oakville, he may sort of say, you know, USMCA negotiations are right around the corner, and start throwing these things, these grenades into the mix. But the takeaway here is we don't get them back to their capacity. Yes, we'll have a plug-in hybrid and a standard hybrid F-Series going there, but we're not back to production capacity. And this is very difficult. Manufacturers have to find a way to absorb that capacity because it's a cost. Toyota with Cambridge and Woodstock, we're going to get them back to capacity with their products. Healthy mix, but no BEVs up here in their current strategy. Stellantis is all over the place with Windsor and Brampton on this one. They're changing on every day. There's a risk there's no such thing as Chrysler in 5 years. I mean, there's one left at the Pacifica, and that's it. So they're really doing poorly right now in the industry with high inventories. And GM with Oshawa and Ingersoll, again, not using capacity. You know, when we look at history in Canada, we look at Ingersoll. Every Equinox you needed could be built in Ingersoll. And then all of a sudden they moved one of the plants to Mexico. We said, heads up. And Unifor didn't believe us. And then all of a sudden they all went. I said, heads up with Oshawa. And they said, no way. And I said, heads up with Oakville. And so we're trying to sort of get ahead of the story and say, you got to watch these real interesting movements. You take Ingersoll that could build 300,000 Equinox, and now they're doing 30,000 Bright Drop. That's a hit, right? That's a hit to the workforce from that perspective. One of the problems that's going on, and I'm not trying to show you that there's a lot of risk. I mean, there's probably more risks than opportunities, but I'm trying to walk you through both sides of the coin right this second, is that when manufacturers have to continue to make money, and they're realizing they're not moving the metal in this electrified strategy, they're going to extend existing vehicle programs. So a truck that might have had a 5-year program that they expected to put a BEV afterwards, they're going to say, no, we're going to push that out 2 or 3 years, and now it's a 6, 7, 8-year program. So that allows them to sort of have a little bit of breathing room, especially if all the dialing back of IRA standards and EPA regulations are going to happen from a U.S. perspective and spread out. Again, the problem is suppliers didn't plan for this when they opened this contract up 8 years ago. So they'll say, great, I can make money in 5 years, but I'm not going to make money 6, 7, and 8. So now they're forced to come back and say, raw materials, geopolitical issues, everything going in between, I have to raise my prices. And the manufacturer goes, we can't, because now we're not competitive. And this is the problem that's going on right now. Just because they can extend a program that's profitable for a manufacturer doesn't mean it's going to be profitable for everyone that's building that vehicle in that chain. And that's where the difficulty comes in. So we're seeing, as of 2026, 16 vehicle programs from last year to this year got pushed out at least 2 years. And why 2 years? Because just outside that window when suppliers need to see RFQ show up. So next month is going to be probably another 6 months and so on. It's just outside of the cusp of when that happened. This is very difficult for planning. Right, when you're trying to align all of the pieces to get a proper vehicle out the door. 9 moved from 25, 8 and add guy to 28, and then so on. If we look at this at an eye chart, and this is just 1 month, these are all the program and vehicle changes that have happened in the last 30 days of announcements. And I try to color code them so you can see this thing. Light blue is a vehicle's life cycle got pushed out 6 or 10 months, their start of production. The middle blue is 11 to 23 months, and the brighter blue, whatever it is over 24 months. A majority of the changes that have happened in the last 30 days are within that 11 to 23 month window move. That's a big issue. Constantly pushing this, and big programs, right? We're talking about trucks, we're talking about Cherokee, we're talking about new Jeeps coming, Terrain, new EV Yukons, and so on. This is what we do every single month. In fact, we do it every week with our clients to say, hey, here's what we know so you can start preparing. And we have not seen this much volatility. I've been doing this for 30 years. In the last couple of years that we've seen it, it's insane. Again, this is the last 30 days. And again, most of them are just outside that planning window. So there's a lot more to come. If we look at all the things built in North America, I sort of want to give an eye chart here of exposure to where it's built in U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And it's funny, when I built this, I always thought that the Trump threat was, we're gonna say, hey, we got 2 borders, don't worry, Canada, we're really going after Mexico. And when Mexico sort of acted first in the press with their 10,000 troops, and he said, great, you got a reprieve, that sort of put us on our heels going, I thought it was going to be the other way around. So, look, he telegraphed his move 60 days before inauguration, right? So that was the idea that this was going to be sort of the threat. But he's 3 for 3. Colombia, Mexico, Canada in terms of I want this, and people are saying, great, you can have it. So he's got momentum, and we're 2 weeks into this presidency. So it's something to really pay attention to. So Mexico was red when I built this chart, so I might have to change the color. But orange represents Canada, red represents Mexico, and U.S. is in the green. In terms of the ones that are high risk, Volkswagen, heavy production volume coming out of Mexico. Stellantis has a balancing issue across all 3 countries. Honda, but the Honda products here are very stable. With what's going on, so we think that's nice. So pay attention to Toyota, right? A lot of Canada and a fair bit of Mexico. So this is the balancing act we're going to look at, not just the actual what the volumes are, but what products are in those. And we're going to go through the product set in those markets in a few slides. So we want to say, well, how can we benchmark if this tariff does go in? We only have a 30-day reprieve, right? Well, how do we benchmark it? And let's look at the 5 key states that Canada has with trade, right? Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee. I just picked on the top 5, sort of. And they're all red states, mind you. They're all states that voted for Trump. So this is going to be an interesting balancing act if he enacts these tariffs, how it basically goes after his voting community. And they are more than 50% of North America production going forward, U.S. production. Very important. Now, if we look on the left-hand side, let's say the strike from 2023, we were shut down 6 or 7 weeks. It basically only hit the Detroit 3, but it hit them in the wallet of like $4 billion in that time frame. Now, let's just pretend that instead of only hitting 3 vehicle manufacturers, it's everyone. So we're going to go a little wider, not deeper into it. If you shut down U.S. production for a week, you're talking about 213,000 units. You shut them down for all of North America, 320,000, and it keeps on getting worse and worse. So if we have a 1-month shutdown, 1.2, 2-month shutdown, another 1.4. These are, I didn't add them up. I should add them up. April, another 1.3. And when you're talking about supply disruption and turning things off real fast, there's a lot of just-in-time production out there that this could happen very, very quickly in this market. So we're staying on top of any kind of thing that's going to disrupt any kind of production. Now, for some manufacturers, this disruption is great because they have very high inventories. They'll take it sort of as a win so they can move some of the metal. I mean, Stellantis has 100 days of Jeeps and 100 days of Rams sitting around. They got to move that metal right now. So let's talk about the tariff concerns. Let's talk about from an impact and a mix. In short term, like I said, high inventories, that's great. High inventory products that can sort of move that metal and make space on their lots. That's sort of a positive in this dark times. We believe D3 will be the most impacted if there is a tariff in place. Just in time is a big deal. This idea that cross-border products that come to a plant just when it's needed. You're talking about vehicle assembly plants that can be shut down within days, if not a week, if they can't get the key seat or key steering wheel or instrument panel from their supplier. Engines, transmissions from both Canada and Mexico, these are the high-value things across multiple times, right? So that's the ones you got to really pay attention to from a powertrain, would add a significant cost. What does this do for Oakville, right? If Trump keeps pushing and Oakville says, yeah, we're going to get the F-Series, and he says, hey, we deserve the F-Series, what does this do to them? Now, the wheels are in motion, so to speak, on Oakville, but you know how fast this industry can change. So we sort of keeping our eye on if there's going to be a different product set there that is going to get disrupted by this conversation. Transaction prices we expect will increase if it goes on for more than 3 weeks. We're talking about at the dealer kind of thing, not that the manufacturer is going to add it to the sticker, but more the transaction price will come up. What this does, it sets the stage for the 2022 USMCA or CUSMA renegotiations. That's what this all is about, right? We're going to use the border as an excuse. We're not going to call it a tariff. We're going to call it a drug war. And because we don't go against USMCA, we're going after border. We're controlling our borders. But when it can open up to real conversation, this is the conversation. So the mix from so let's talk about Chevy, Silverados, and Sierras, right? They do have redundant sources, obviously, in the United States. But 53% of all light-duty Silverados that come from Mexico. 25% come from Canada. So there is redundancies in the key truck products for the manufacturers where their high profit is, but Canada is a very, very important part of the conversation still. So it can't just be like, hey, Canada, we're going to do what we want. There's way too many interactive parts going on. Now, the risk here is if you penalize Mexico, there's a lot of low-price cars for entry-level buyers. You got the Ford Maverick and Bronco Sport. You got the Nissan Sentra and the Versa, Honda HR-V and things of that nature. When you take that out of the product mix, people don't have the wallet to all of a sudden always go for the $50,000 vehicle. You got to get them in an entry level and move them up the chain of the brands. So when you if you hit Mexico with this, it's really penalizes manufacturers than in an entry level vehicle. It'll either force them to look completely somewhere else, or it'll force them the consumer into the used car market. And then key market leaders, Toyota Tacoma coming out of Mexico, big one. RAV4 and CRV, this is both borders we're talking about. The Equinox, the Blazer, the Terrain, the Maverick. I mean, these are high volume movers for the manufacturers that are built in key areas outside of the U.S. So these are decisions that can't be taken lightly when you come after border countries. So let's just talk about global electrification. This is constantly moving down the line. We'll get you about a third of all vehicles built globally. By the end of the decade, will be pure BEV, but a healthy balance of standard hybrids and plug-in hybrids. Standard hybrids will always have that higher mark. It's expensive to make a plug-in hybrid. You have an ICE, then you bring people into a normal hybrid, then you want them to jump to BEVs. But the problem is you got to convince a consumer that a plug is not a disruptor in their life. That's the hardest thing to do in this industry. I mean, good luck moving a truck buyer into plugs. So here comes Ram. Hey, we're going to have the Ram Charger. We're going to put a big 3.6 liter engine, made it to a 92 kilowatt battery. We're going to call it a zero-emission vehicle, so the government counts it, because technically you don't have to put gas in it. Everyone's going to put gas in it. Allows them to keep their engine plants running, allows them to say we're a zero-emission vehicle. It becomes a big smoke screen, but then they can pat themselves on the back. But what this does globally is it puts nearly 3 million vehicles on the road that need chargers. And obviously infrastructure is one of the big conversations, along with range and cost and things of that nature, that have to go forward. For North America, similar path. Again, this is going to be dialed down. A lot of manufacturers don't make their product changes today just because of political cycles, right? They have to sort of weave it into the strategy. You can't just keep on turning this thing on and off. But as that one slide showed you about all the changes, we expect a lot more changes coming in the future. High, though, penetration rate of standard hybrids in North America. And the need for 40 million plug stations by the end of the decade to satisfy this view. We never drank the BEV Kool-Aid. Our job is to tell a realistic story. Governments and environmentalists don't drive the industry, the consumers do. So we weren't at 60% one day and said, oh man, we got to keep dialing it back. We have to be very realistic. If I had key point, right? Ford came out with the Lightning. They wanted their suppliers to bid on 250,000. We said, you're out of your mind. That's not possible. You're creating a market that doesn't exist. And they built 40,000, right? So this is the reality that's going on in the industry. I know I'm preaching to the choir for some of you here, but it's our everyday. So in terms of North America opportunities, BYD is obviously the three letters everyone's paid attention to these days. When you look at the Chinese will take market share first, profitability second. So 100% tariff, add 10% on top of that, it's a BB gun against a tank, right? They don't care, right? This is the idea. Build a market share, let the money flow. BYD's already profitable in this space, right? This is not a new BEV player that's saying, boy, I'm going to use the U.S. to get profitable. They're already profitable. Them and Tesla. So when they come into a market, and they're going to come through Mexico, they're going to tackle a Mexican consumer, they're going to sell it there, they're going to move into the U.S. eventually on a profit base, which no other BEV player has done other than Tesla. Right? No legacy players making money in this space. Big European push. The Europeans shot themselves in the foot. They said, hey, you better buy a BEV or else. And they said, great. That BYD over there is 20,000 at ID460. They said, wait a second, we didn't want you to do that. We wanted you to buy those Volkswagens. They said, well, you weren't very specific on how it was supposed to fit this bill of BEVs. Chery is an importer. They've been trying for years. They've tried California for a while, but they're going to keep looking for cracks. Geely, for some reason, everyone forgets Volvo's Chinese owned, and that's got to be part of the conversation about what's happening. Little anecdotal stuff. Tesla in China, Shanghai said, wait a second, you have all your cameras, you can be spying on us, we want the intel. They said, great. So all the Tesla camera detail in Shanghai is actually stored on Shanghai servers. So I see a day where if we do let the Chinese in and there are Chinese software, we're going to ask for the same. Hey, we want everything that's being collected on a U.S. server so we can monitor it. But there are ways that to be taking a look at it. And with the Lincoln Co. and Polestar, they're really pushing these very unique brands for the consumer. SAIC is a juggernaut all over the world. They're just not here yet. VinFast is its own case study. Richest guy in Vietnam decides to build a car, bring it to the United States, says, I want to be the next Tesla. It keeps on getting delayed and delayed. So we'll see how that really pans out. And then the contract manufacturers, the small players, the disruptors of the world need to pay attention to. I mean, we learned about Honda and Nissan wanting to get together. They've since sort of walked away. But one of the logic points was, Japan gets in and says, I don't want Foxconn buying Nissan. So Honda, you better step in and save this because we don't want this offshoot and getting outside the Keiretsu. So let's look at each vehicle manufacturer. I have no idea what time I have. How are we doing on time? Just let me know. Yeah, thanks. Perfect, thank you. So let's look at each manufacturer and the penetration rates in North America. This talks about their powertrain, obviously BEV, FEV, standard hybrids, ICE, if there's any extended range vehicles in here. Again, in the forecast, we don't have GM over 50% of not needing an engine. Even hybrids need an engine. Ford, similar path. Stellantis has a sort of a shotgun approach to their product. They're reinventing the platforms for the Stella platform, which says, hey, we can build one platform, and if we got to dial in BEV, so be it. If we got to build in ICE or standard hybrid, so be it. So you're going to see a lot more flexible manufacturing. I mean, Audi just came out and said, we're dropping the e-tron name because it's so polarized. We're going to just make them the A6 and Q6, and if there's electrified versions, so be it. This is the industry trying to sort of bring everything in and sort of calibrate to the consumer rather than having a $1 billion dedicated BEV, a $1 billion dedicated ICE, and so on. They're trying to intertwine this. Very difficult thing to pull off. The European manufacturers, they have more marquee, higher-priced vehicles. If a tariff comes in North America, they're the ones that will pass it on to the consumer. The BMWs and Mercedes of the world, they'll pass it on to the consumer. Entry level, it can't be passed on 100%. Someone's got to eat that cost. But that, we're talking about higher penetration rates of BEVs, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen adding extended range. Again, extended range is going to be this new frontier, right? It's been around for years. The old BMW i3 had it. They put a little 600cc generator in there and zipped it around. But the idea here is that the engine will not be attached to the propulsion system. It is only a generator. So if the propulsion system is only battery only, the government will count it as a battery electric vehicle or a zero-emission vehicle, which then satisfies that quota. But everyone's going to put gas in this thing, right? It doesn't add the torque, doesn't add anything. It's just a big generator. So you're going to see more and more. Volkswagen's pushing this. Like I said earlier, the Ram Charger is also doing it. Geely is the only manufacturer, other than Tesla, that is pure BEV, very, very fast in North America. In terms of Asia-based manufacturers, they were slower to the game. You can call slower, you can call wiser, whatever words you want to use. They want to be around for 500 years, not 50, not 5. They're all about, this is legacy companies. They sit back, they watch, they learn, and then they go at the market. And, you could have rode that Prius right into the BEV sunset. They said, nope, we're holding back on this. And everyone thought they were nuts until they're not. So they'll eventually get back in, they'll learn. Obviously, the holy grail for them is fuel cells, which are 20, 30 years out, but there's always that new innovation. Remember, you got to keep making money. You don't want to give everyone everything today because what are you going to sell them tomorrow? It's the 8-track, it's an album, it's a tape, it's an MP3 player. I mean, you got to get people sort of motivated to keep spending money. Subaru, they're just hot, they're using all their low capacity anywhere to build vehicles that people want. There's none in there. With a Toyota relationship, though, they can leverage some BEVs. Nissan is sort of it's a tough one these days, separated from Renault. So they're running out there trying to find a partner to sort of help them. They really have no leadership position anywhere in the world with their products, but they have some good products. So that's where partnering is going to be an important idea. And Hyundai, Hyundai is just killing it, right? They were a joke back in the 90s. And then all of a sudden, every iteration of their products, they listen to consumer, and they're winning awards left and right, a ton of value. Even their prices are going up, but you still get a lot of value for the price, great warranty, et cetera. They also used the IRA loophole and said, hey, we got this IRA thing. Why don't we just lease all our BEVs, and we can still ship them in from South Korea? So we think if there's one thing that's going to get stopped, is that going to be that leasing loophole. Then you say, look, the first rule was build here. That's great. Unless you're leasing. Okay, well, and that sort of obliterates all of the logic behind build where you sell kind of conversation. Toyota, last to the game, but not by mistake, it's by design. Mazda's starting to get into the BEV space, and then their relationship at Huntsville is sort of a mixed bag of products. So problems, more problems. The gold here are new BEVs that are added every single year to a new type of consumer that's very socially motivated, right? TikTok has a life. I always make the joke, I'd make 5 cars, I'd mock them up, maybe have no powertrain, just pedal cars for that matter. Give it a top 5 TikTokers, I got 10 million eyeballs in 24 hours. And I made that joke for a couple years now, but it's a reality of a new type of consumer that is open to new brands. They don't have to say, hey, here's a brand that's been around for 120 years. Oh, wait a second, what's this new shiny object? And you're getting more and more consumers that are not looking at legacy of what it can do, but what it could do today, not what it could do. So the problem here is that new entrants every year make the old entrants stale. And every year we're adding. So just last year, there was 46 BEVs available in the North America market. By the end of the decade, we're talking about 124. Now, will they all survive? No. But we have to give them some sort of credence of existence till they don't survive. But you're talking about a market that's really tough right this second and basically doing a 2.5-time multiple in 8 short years, 2 vehicle life cycles. So this is where it's going to be very difficult. We'll get you to about 5.5 million units of pure BEVs built by the end of the decade. But this idea of having all these separate nameplates, they keep on getting whittled down over time. This is a slide that keeps people up at night. The blue is our forecast, and the green are the business plans. So you put those together, you sort of have a capacity. And the gray are the optimists that believe we are 7 short years away from flying cars. And they're out there. Even if the optimists are right, the majority of vehicles still need an internal combustion engine, right? So this is the death of the engine in our lifetime is not happening. I mean, it's going to be here. It works, and they're going to figure out better ways. But that capacity, that differential is very difficult for planning purposes. So how can Tesla do it? Well, Tesla is the only manufacturer I can remember that can get away with 9 nameplates by the end of the decade. That's it. And they're going to build north of 250 per year per nameplate. That is a sustainable business model, and Tesla can get it. Let's say the Cybertruck was a Chevy Cybertruck. My forecast on how many would be sold would be 0, okay? It'd be, okay, this thing's a joke, but it's the Tesla Cybertruck. It's polarizing, right? People, So the Tesla has to be kept on its own shelf. And too many people like Wall Street and things like that are sort of equating other companies with Tesla, which I think is a huge mistake in this conversation. But on the flip side, there's going to be 800 competitors by the end of the decade in this space. And if you look at their average volume, they're south of 50, some in the 25, an unsustainable business model, right? So this is the dynamic. Every time you throw a car in there, you got to justify the capacity to build that vehicle. Everything that goes in it. You can't survive on 5,000 BEVs. You need 50,000, 100,000 to survive. And there's way too many people going, I got one, I got the new shiny object. Pray it takes off, or government supports me, or someone likes it so much they buy it from me. And that's our current dilemma these days about building this market. All right, so I don't mean to pick on GM. This was some low-hanging fruit. Everyone's got the same problem. I just want to put a reality statement on it. On the left-hand side are all of the battery electric vehicles that they wanted planned to be built in 2023 and the volumes that they were telling their suppliers. A couple of highlights, 96,000 Hummers, they built less than 6,000. 90,000 Lyrics, they built less than 21,000, right? This is the dilemma in our industry. Suppliers trying to build a production capacity around something that will not take off, and they're left holding the bag, and then it gets cynical. So what they do, hey, GM, next time, you pay for my tooling up front. Or I'll give you scaled pricing. You want a $10 part? Fine, the first 10,000 parts are 50, and I'll get you down to 10 eventually. And mega tier ones have the luxury of pushing back. Smaller tier twos and those that are just maybe in a quiet place, this is a very difficult space for them to play in because they're just thankful the RFQ shows up on their desk, and they have to believe what their tier one tells them. Call me, I'll tell you what to do. But this is the real takeaway, right? That nearly every single vehicle that they had in their plans had a significant difference in the real production volume that came out. Inventories are going back up. We thought that COVID would have been a nice little lesson about inventory management and discipline, but manufacturers like Hyundai said, hey, we're going to pump up our dealerships, and therefore, okay, everyone's going to follow suit. And then what happens? Jeeps and Rams all sitting on like 120 days of inventory, and now we're going to move that metal off those lots to make space for the new ones. But we were sort of hoping to level off at maybe a 45-day average. It used to be 90 days for trucks, 60 days for cars. But here they go again, back on the inventory, which means more incentives coming in, which means more leasing deals that make sense today but won't make sense in 3 years because no one's going to buy them out. $300 Lyrics and $400 F-Series, no one's going to buy that lease out in 3 years. So now you're going to flood the market with really high-quality BEVs in the $25,000 mark, just as the manufacturer is trying to drop you a $35,000 brand new one. North America players, you know this stuff, right? Tesla, GM, these are the ones that are all doing over 100,000 units per year in North America by the end of the decade. Toyota's just cresting over that. The disruptors, the ones that are under the niche products, Lucid, yes, we still have BYD in here coming into Mexico. Maybe we'll push that out deeper into 27, but they're still coming. GLE, Mazda, VinFast, and a lot of manufacturers maybe you've never heard of that are saying, I got one of these things too. In terms of light vehicle sales in the United States first, we'll talk about that, we do have growth, right? You do still have a pent-up demand of 12, 13 years on the streets these days. You still have people that are coming off of leases, want to look at things. You still have a consumer out there that wants to buy. It's not all doom and gloom. There is some sort of growth in there, but this idea getting back to the high watermark of 17.5 million sales in 26, it just doesn't hold up the analysis. In terms of Canada, look, your high watermark was 2.08 in 17, and we're actually going to have you over that next year. So these are, we're in a positive path. This isn't all doom and gloom. We're sort of flat this year off of last year, but we're going to see some growth, especially if manufacturers are able to build what they want to build, right? Not build what they're being told to build. Look, Mexico. Last year alone, 7.3% of all vehicles sold in Mexico were Chinese brands. They're here. Like this whole idea of keeping Chinese out, it's funny. They're already here. That's just the Chinese brands. Nearly 20% of all vehicles sold in Mexico came from China. You're talking about BMWs, Kias, Buicks, right? Not just Chinese brands coming over, but actually that is their source. Every Buick Envision in the world comes from China. And a lot of people don't even know that when they think it's an American car. And our BEV sales, right? We'll get you to about 25% of all vehicles sold in the United States to be pure BEV by the end of the decade as a sort of the barometer. But the takeaway here is you can't do it with $100,000 vehicles or $132,000 crab walking Hummers, right? You got to do it with entry-level pricing. And unfortunately, entry-level pricing is $45,000 in some cases while the price is going up. But you need a respectable vehicle to build your market share. So the only way you really get to that number is a healthy balance of entry and luxury, not pure luxury going through. We'll get you about 1.6 million vehicles sold this year to be pure BEV. Look, we're going to sort of plateau off from a growth path. Again, this is not in line with GM's 100% by 35 or government push and things like that. So they sort of get a breather for a little bit. So just to sum up, and I hope we'll have some time for questions, but a couple more slides. Look, there is a new consumer out there that we have to take care of. They are socially motivated. They're an emotional buyer. They care what they care about. They see what their friends are driving, see what's out there. And so it's got to be paid attention to this type of consumer, looking at older brands, not just always saying it based on quality of what they've done to date. Less trim variants you're seeing, right? So if we can find a way to say, okay, I go to dealership, I used to have 7 trim variants. Well, why? Don't even have an entry anymore. Have something that's 1 level up, 4 levels up, and 7 levels up, and try to really tap into the consumer's wallet. This is what's really impacting the suppliers too that rely on certain trim level differentiation to move the metal. Over-the-air updates is a big one. And no one's really talking about the idea that when you're in a used car business, if you have a vehicle that's over-the-air update, and it's not just BEVs, right? I mean, I have a Bronco. It has over-the-air update. It's an ICE. If that thing goes in the used car market, that's a secondary and potential tertiary revenue stream for the manufacturers. It does nothing to move new metal. It does nothing for the supply base, but it's a new revenue stream because I'll say, great, you bought a used car, we have over-the-air updates, or we're going to charge you for not advertising on your vehicle. So before there really wasn't a secondary, other than service, secondary market for manufacturers to tap into that used car market, over-the-air updates opens that up for them, which hurts production numbers because they can go into an existing volume source. China, it's not if, it's when. And I think we have to come to the reality of it. We tried in the 80s and 70s and 80s with the Japanese. They're a juggernaut in North America. We tried with Koreans. They said, great, we're going to come here. The Chinese are going to come, and they're going to come because they want market share. And then they'll build off it from there. And you're going to use Europe as that launching pad, as I said before. But we're going to try to say foreign entity of concern rules, cybersecurity rules, all this other thing. But there's going to be way too many sort of cracks in the system to get in here. You know, if I'm China, I want to really get in here. Hey, I'll buy Chrysler. I'll be a hero. I'll go save Chrysler. I'll rebadge a bunch of Chinese vehicles, call them Chryslers. All of a sudden, we're going to forget because they're going to bring labor to the North America. Supply chain, yeah, short-term tariffs, but tariffs are long-term. Now it's really about the evaluation of your production life cycles. Look, the suppliers follow the manufacturers, the money. But if this is a long-term pain or long-term of disruption of any day, Trump can come in and say, I'm going to turn it on, turn it off, the safety net's going to be fine. I'm building in the United States. There's my safety net. Okay, I'm not saying that's the best answer, but people are going to look for that safety net. So they're going to start reevaluating where their current production is if this disruption continues, and it's going to continue. Program extensions are not good for the supply base. It's very difficult. And really thinking the just-in-time process. I mean, you know, when Ukraine got hit, wiring harnesses, it really hit Volkswagen because they got a lot of wiring harnesses in Ukraine. So they had to say, we need secondary and tertiary supplies going forward. Electrification, look, it's here to stay. It's just going to be over time. It's one arrow in the quiver of the automotive space. This idea that one product is a solution for everyone never made any sense. It's a great product. We're not anti-electrification. We're just sort of pro-reality in this conversation. But with Elon's having Trump's ear, we're going to see a lot more autonomy, a lot more AI. He's pushing the cyber cabs and robo-cabs and things like that. Now China, you know, banging on our door with this idea of AI at a cheaper, whether that's true or not, that's going to be the real arms race of the future, the whole AI side of things. And that's where it's going to start bleeding into automotive. Existing players, look, they realize they can't do it organically. Lots of partnerships in discussion or already in the works. So you're talking about GM and Honda talking, GM and Ford, GM and Hyundai, the recent one, you know, they want to repackage Hyundai panel vans and call them GMs and then use existing capacity to sort of share it. Honda and Nissan sort of severed, but they're still talking, but they sort of walked away. They didn't like the deal. Honda and Sony, new players, and Volkswagen and Rivian. This is going to continue going forward, this idea of more collaboration to absorb the battery capacity that they plan that they're not going to absorb. The reality is when new players come in, they're unexperienced. They need their hand held. If they find a community that's going to help them get in the community. I talk to a ton of suppliers that have a German parent or Japanese parent. I talk to their salespeople that go, they just don't know how we work around here. They have these expectations because that's their core home expectations. So the supplier community or the jurisdiction that's willing to work with that new player is going to win if they have open arms and sort of guide them. And that's a big thing because, you know, there's a harsh reality here that, you know, there's plans and there's execution. And I think we got a lot more plans and execution that are not going to balance not only the next 5 years, but 10 years and so on. So I threw a lot at you. I appreciate your time. I have no idea how much time I have left for, I got 5 minutes. Any questions? Yeah, thank you. I answered them all? That's great. Yes. I apologize. I can't hear a word you're saying. Sorry. Is that? Oh, there's one. Okay. Sorry.
So thank you very much, and I think very interesting oversights in the trends. But you're looking at this from a manufacturer's point of view, and I'm looking at it from a user's point of view, and I see massive changes in how we use vehicles. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the fact that you know what vehicles are means you can share them, or you can access them. You may be, and if you don't have to have them all the time, you can have different vehicles for different use cases. And if you kind of look at all those predictions of vehicle sharing, then we won't need to make as many vehicles because instead of having your vehicle parked in your driveway for 90% of the time, you'll be able to use vehicles more efficiently. In addition, we're seeing legislation about clean zones about where vehicles can go, and integration with transit and all of those other issues that are in Toronto. The problem is not it's the number of vehicles, right? Congestion. So I'm just wondering how you see market trends, particularly in North America, affecting the demand for the vehicles in the way that you talk about them.
Yeah, great question. So we bake everything in the conversation. We bake in the sales and market trends. So I'm going to give you sort of a counterpoint to the use side. The idea of a shared vehicle was great. Raven, or I forget what it's called, but Maven. So that was the idea. Or Ford wanted, hey, let's have 6 owners of one vehicle. That really didn't take off, especially from the U.S. side. People don't want their stuff constantly moved out of their own vehicle. How dare you? So what the idea of the shared concept opens for us is it opens up areas like cities that didn't want a car, but now they have access to a car. So from our perspective, that adds a car to the market that didn't exist before. The other side is the gig economy and the Ubers, right? Everyone says, why go Uber out there? Well, how many hours in a day do I drive my car, if not down to minutes? I don't know, 30 minutes a day? Ubers are getting used 10 hours a day. So what that does is that driving cycle, that vehicle has to be replaced in 18 months, where the traditional consumer replaced their car in maybe 3-5 years. So when this whole idea of shared cars came out, we're like, oh my God, it's going to be a major disruptor. We're going to build 10 million units in North America. It's decimated. It hasn't decimated the market. It actually has stabilized a little bit because of those different use cases. So we do have to put those in the conversation. We do the sales stuff as well, not just the manufacturing side. But it's always a great case because eventually there might be a time we're going, hey, we figured out the model that lets us make one car for every 5 people, not a 1-to-1. Consumers have just not bid off on that yet.
My only observation at work at York is that if you look at the demographic, urban residents, 18 to 25, 5 years ago, many of them aspired to a car. Now most of them don't have cars and they use Uber or vehicle sharing. And so I absolutely agree with you at the macro level, but I think that trend, we all got smartphones because our kids had better phones than us. And I just wonder whether it's going to change.
And that's why in North America, we're never going to get back to the old high water mark. We're always going to be about 1 to 2 million units less than a high water mark per year. But you also remember there's a pent-up demand out there. The average life cycle of vehicle on the market today is 12 years old. So that has a replacement cycle as well. I'm not saying you're wrong in it. I'm saying it is one. We just have not. We've been tracking that since they decided to mention this idea of shared vehicles for decades, and it really has not moved the needle so significantly that it's completely disrupted the market yet.
Hi, I'm Kim Cooper from Youth Culture. Thinking about the changing landscape and our young leaders of tomorrow, and as far as their career paths and careers of the future, where are the opportunities? Is it in engineering? Is it still in skilled trades? What are you anticipating even 5 years down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. The labor pool is tough. That's the biggest problem that suppliers have and manufacturers have. And we manufacturers then go to certain states. They don't drug test anymore because they won't have any employees. They just said we got to take the guardrails off it because no one wants to do it because there's this vision of automotive as this. I'm coming home dirty with oil under my fingernails. They're like clean room environments. So what Honda does is say we're going to start teaching kids at high school. We're going to bring them into plants. We're going to show them videos of what does a career in this space mean. It's not always turning a wrench. It's the robotics. It's the AI. It's the planning of the facilities. Every second that a manufacturer can take off the production life cycle equates to an extra dollars on their revenue stream. But the problem is that people aren't educated on that value anymore. They see other things. They get an IT or they do something else, and they don't see it. And that, to me, is the biggest. We've done labor studies for most of the countries across North America, around the world, and that's their biggest problem, finding a qualified labor pool that wants to show up. Absenteeism was one of the biggest things that was hurting manufacturers in the past because people just weren't showing up going, well, who else are you going to get? And they were stuck. So in terms of that, I think it behooves the jurisdictions and the governments to sort of say, we have to hit an educational early stage, partnering with the vehicle manufacturers, seeing what they want to take their companies, and educating people going, this is what this industry is all about. I'm telling you, you will open the eyes of many people going, that's not what I thought automotive was. We thought it's all tech schools and things like that. So that's going to be a continuing problem, the labor pool. And I'm trying to push people to say, pay attention to this industry, engineers, all that stuff.
And really, flying cars in 7 years, you said.
Are you one of those? Okay, I'll put you on my chart over here. Yeah, 7 years. Yes, thank you. Anyone else? Good. Good. Thank you very much.